Hello. Today I'm going to talk to you about going through a tutorial on how to export a map from a mapping software product to Illustrator. So this is going to be a pretty quick overview. I'm going to start, if you've got your document up here, hopefully you've printed out and you can follow along, but I'm going to start at step 19. The map is ready to export. Select View, Layout View. So now the map view has changed so that you can choose which part of the map to export. You can see that it's kind of skewed out here, and we want to reorient the map to be the middle of the page. So you can use the zoom in and zoom out tools and then pan tool to move the image. First you want to make sure you click on the image, then use the pan tool and drag this maybe to the center more. And then using the zoom tool, just crop to the area that you're most interested in. So now you can see that I've got the part of the map that I'm really interested in the most, which is the main Chesapeake Bay water with its benthic IBI sampling points on it. However, you can see that the sampling points are too small on this map. So what you need to do is go over to your layers and right click, go to properties, and you're going to be here. It says graduated color symbols. Click on the word symbol and property for all symbols. And this is where you can change the size to be much bigger. So let's go to number 8 and see how that looks. So here you can see the dots are legible. You can see the colors, and yet they're not overlapping each other too much. So we're still not done with this layout. Before we can export, we need to insert a legend and a scale bar. So I've changed back to the black arrow, and now we're going to go Insert, Scale Bar. You can pick whichever scale bar you like. Under Properties, you can specify the units. So that's here, and you can see here there's 2 and 4. Whatever it says, whatever you need it to be, you can change to be however many units that you need. And then you just push OK for properties, and then OK on the scale bar. It's going to generate a scale bar, and you see it here. Then you're going to insert the legend. So you go back up to Insert, and you click Legend. So here's an interesting point about the software, and you just need to export the actual data layer. These other layers that you see here don't really need to be on your map legend, right? There's nothing that we're going to show. Everyone knows what these are going to be based on the colors, and you don't need to define them in the legend. So I'm going to take everything off but the 2011 Bibi data layer. You can click through all this. You don't need a legend title right now. We are going to do all that kind of editing in Illustrator. Then you see it generates this legend. I'm going to drag it down here so you can kind of see. So you can drag it down, and it generates its own legend. It tells you what it is. It tells you the breakpoints. And so here we are. I'm going to rearrange some of this so that you can see it better. Maybe something like that. Okay, so now we have kind of all the elements that we have on our map that we're going to need in Illustrator. So ready to export the map. You want to save it, of course. So then you're going to go File, Export Map, and you're going to have to go through all these steps to export it in the place that you want it to be. So you have your name of your file, and then down here you should also have it as a .ai. And so down here are all your options. PDF, SVG is what we talked about before. SVG is perfectly fine. JPEG, PNG, TIFF, and GIFs are all raster-based images. So you don't want to export as those, but the best thing to do is to export it as a native Illustrator file for now if you have Illustrator. You want to check this box, Clip Output to Graphics Extent. This means that what you see on your layout view is what's going to be imported into Illustrator and nothing more. And then you want to click on this little format, make sure it says CMYK and vectorize layers, but especially check this convert marker symbols to polygons. For whatever reason, GIS uses these as fonts, so any markers that you're using are actually font types, and so other people might not be able to see them, and that's when it gets converted on someone else's computer and it looks really wonky. So you want to convert those marker symbols to polygons. And then you click Save. Alright, so now we're going to, you can see my wheel is still spinning, so it's still exporting the map. But once it exports the map, then you can go to Illustrator and open the new document. I'll just leave that there and use the previous document. So open Illustrator. And you're going to have all these dialog boxes on the sides, maybe not. You can arrange them however you want. Then you're going to go to File, Open, and you're going to click on the Illustrator file you just saved, whatever it's named, and it's going to open, and the first thing you're going to see is this box that says it contains text that created in a previous version. Always click the word Update. Don't click OK because it won't import all the information from GIS. So always click Update. So hopefully your file looks like this. You can see it looks exactly what we were looking at in GIS, and it has all the elements. So first you want to resize your artboard to whatever you're using this for. Is it for a PowerPoint presentation? Is it for a printed, product? So you always want to resize to what you need, and so we're going to resize just to the regular 8.5 and 11 inches for letter size, just to give you an example. Now you always have to resize proportionally in Illustrator, and always make sure that you're moving the scale bar with your map. So I'm going to hit Select All. It highlights. I'm going to hold the Shift key, and I'm going to drag this to the extent of my artboard. The artboard is not real. You can go right up to the edge of it. It's fine. It's not a piece of paper where if you go off the edge, you won't see it. Alright, now we're going to open our Layers palette. Under Windows, Layers, you have this Layers palette, and this is going to be a large part of what you're working on first when it comes to your Illustrator document. You should see these other two layer and then layers. So under the layers is where all your original GIS layer is. So you click this little arrow and all the layers come down. And the best thing about exporting from ArcGIS is that they come in as their own layers. Unfortunately, QGIS has not done this. So if you have QGIS, all your layers are going to come in as individual paths, polygons, shapes, dots, and it's just going to be one long list of all sorts of different things. And so what you're going to want to do is follow along and do the same things, but with a lot more layers. You're still going to have to unclip all the clipping masks, and you're still going to have to group your different layers. So we want to remove the clipping mask in the document so we can edit the different elements. Right now, if you click on this thing, it's one big piece. See? Oh, mine changed. That's not good. So the undo button is your best friend. So undo, move, undo, move, undo, move, until it's back where you want it to be. Alright. Sometimes, I guess not this time, but sometimes when you bring something into Illustrator, it's one large piece. And the first thing you're going to want to do is unclip the clipping masks. So the way to do that is to go up to Object, Clipping Mask, and Release. Now this one particularly was down here I was clicking on this particular one, but sometimes you have to do that. The very first thing you need to do is unclip a clipping masks. But anyway, so we're going to do that for every single clipping mask that might be here. So again, you're going to select all. You're going to go to Object. You're going to go to Clipping Mask. And you're going to go to Release. Now you see how everything is highlighted and every single clipping mask has been released. They're still there. There's still a box that's going to be there, but you can now edit each individual element in your map. So we want to delete the clear boxes that we're clipping all the shapes. So under the layers, you can see the word path. And the first thing at the top, it says path, and there's a white box. Those are your clipping masks. So you click on that and you hit delete. Next, we want to group everything in the other layer together. So there's a couple different ways that you can do that. But you can click up on here, there's a little circle, and if you click on that, it actually selects all the things that are in your layer. So you can see it's connected all the things in the layer but not in the other layers. And then you do Object, Group. Now you can see on your layers palette that that whole layer is grouped together, and that's your legend here. We're going to lock the objects layer to other two layer here and just work with the other layers on this document. Under the layers layer, we need to organize the images. The first item under layers is other. This layer is part of the clipping masks as well, so it can be selected and deleted. As you go down, you're going to see that there's this path with a white rectangle for each layer, and this is what we're trying to get rid of. Again, this is much easier if you're exporting from ArcGIS, but if you're exporting from QGIS, you might not need to do this really. You might just leave them there. They kind of create clutter, but they're not visible, so I don't know that it really matters in the end. Now we want to group each layer together, just like we did with other two. So under the Bibby, you just click that little circle again. It highlights all the circles that are the Bibby sites, and you do Object, Group. You can see it immediately turns into a group, and then you'll do that for each of the remaining layers. Okay, so all of our layers are there and they're grouped. So we want to lock all the layers except for this last layer, state boundaries. Okay, so now everything's locked except for this last one. And I'm going to just minimize all these just so it's easier to look at when you don't have to have them like that. So I'm going to try to move this so you can see it better. Lock all the layers except for the state boundaries, and then you can right click on this, and you can do it out here. So you're going to right click, go to Ungroup. You can also do Object, Ungroup. And the reason we're going to do that is because each of these strokes, this line, is separate from this colored background. In GIS, it comes out as two different layers when you have a line or a stroke. on top of a polygon. But we don't need both, right? We only need one. So this is one of the easier ways to clean up your maps in Illustrator. So with the land piece selected, go to Select, Same, Fill Color, and now all the land is connected. Then you can either right click or do Object, Group, and you'll see in your color palette, here's your color palette here, that everything is yellow and there isn't a stroke on here. But we do kind of want a stroke because we do want to show the state outlines. So on this you can add any color you want. I'm going to do a similar but heavier color, maybe more like a, Anyway, you can fiddle around with this as long as you want, but I want to have an outline on there and I want to make it something like the tan color but a little bit darker, so now it's a brown. Just to point out, if you want to, you can now use your stroke palette and you can just have the weights of those stroke lines be the same. You also want the cap to be round and the corner to be round, so you can click on those. And if you wanted to make it a dashed line, this is also where you make a dashed line. Okay. So you want to delete the extra strokes in the layer by clicking on one to select it. Remember, we just colored the stroke of the these fill polygons, but there's actually individual objects overlaying, and you see I just selected one, and you can see in the colors palette that it is indeed just the stroke because it doesn't have a fill color. And so we're going to do the same thing where we do Select, Same. This time you're going to use stroke color. And you can see everything is still the same, and I picked the same things, and you just hit the delete key. Now all those extra strokes are gone and you don't have to really worry about them. You can see where this can be a complicated process over time if you're doing lots of different layers and they all have strokes on them, and so getting rid of all this extraneous information is easier to deal with in the end. Alright. You can do this with all the layers. So now that we are done with the state boundary, you can lock the state boundary, and then you can do it with your Bay Islands if you need to, which are these tiny little islands. There you go. There's an island. So you would do this for each one, right? And you can get rid of the strokes completely and just use the fill. Always remember that you want to save your document as you go along. Right now you'll see up at the top it says converted, so you definitely want to save as and either overwrite your original one from your mapping software or do a version 2, whatever you'd like. I don't like the word converted. I don't know why they do that, but you know, maybe this is version 2. Your dialog box comes up and you hit OK. So once you've gotten to the point where you've gone through each of the layers, you've unlocked them and you've looked at all of them, you've cleaned them up, you also can look at your 2011 Bibby or any of your sampling points and make them different too. So one of the things that you can do in Illustrator, because remember we've exported this from a software, and so if you ever need to do something to your sampling points, how do you change them in Illustrator but still keep the accuracy? So one of the great kind of functions of Illustrator is the transform key, and so up here you can do object, transform, and then transform each. So I have all these dots, but I want all of them to be 15% larger. How do you do that? How do you go about changing that? So that's where the transform each really comes in handy. So that you don't have to go back to your mapping software and do it there and then have to start this whole process again. Now one thing I want to note is in here you want to make sure that everything's ungrouped before you try to do the transform each. So you just select them all, go to object, transform, and transform each, but they do have to be ungrouped. So we do a lot of grouping, a lot of ungrouping, and a lot of locking and unlocking. I'm still having problems. You can see as I do this, it's expanding the entire figure rather than the individual dots. And so this is the kind of thing you really want to take care of, because like I said, you want to remember that everything in Illustrator needs to still be as accurate to the data as possible. So you'll continue to work with this until you can get to the point where you can click all of these. One of the ways that you can do that is to use the magic wand tool, and then you can click on all the ones that are red, and then all the ones that are orange. You can even do it down here in your legend if you need to. Yellow, light green, and dark green. So I'm holding the shift key down as I select all of those. Let's see if that does the trick. Still not working. So sometimes you have to go through this process and see what works and what doesn't. You can always go back into your mapping software and do it from that point of view. The other thing I wanted to point out about this map is that one of the things that was missing from this map actually is the Virginia state line, well, Virginia-Maryland state line that crosses the water. I don't know if anybody noticed, but you have Maryland here and Virginia here, and the line of the state line actually goes along the bottom of the Potomac, and then it crosses in a little bit of a jag and comes up over here. But notice it's not here. And so one of the things that we really want to think about when we're exporting our maps from the GIS software is what can you do to make that that you want to make sure you're doing that ahead of time and not have it happen in Illustrator. So my suggestion would be to have two state boundary layers. So it's the same exact layer that's listed here, state boundaries, and it's just in your GIS software twice. One on top, that's just a line, and one on the bottom, that's just the color. And again, this goes back to that idea of like when it exports into Illustrator, you're going to have a lot of different lines laying on top of each other, and it's something that definitely needs to be dealt with and cleaned up and made pretty in Illustrator. So once you get through your whole mapping process, you've set the artboard how you want. You can change your legend. You can change the fonts. If you don't want all these decimal points, you can change that here too. All those things. You're going to save it, and then you're going to export it. And so Illustrator is really good for other Adobe Creative Suite products, but in the end, you're probably going to be using these as PNGs, JPEGs, or TIFFs. So you do File, Export, browse to wherever you want it to be, and then down here, we're going to pick PNG. There's plenty of other options like PDF, JPEG, TIFF, etc. And then one thing you do want to do is check Use Artboard. It will only clip to what's on your artboard. If you don't want to use the artboard, that's fine. If your figure goes outside the artboard that you're using, just make sure that you are choosing the thing that you definitely want. Then you get this dialog box, and we're going to export as 300 dpi. That's high resolution. It's going to be the biggest file size. It's going to give you the most options when it comes to putting it into like a printed document. But if you know you're only going to use this for PowerPoint, you can always reduce the resolution here. And then you save it, and it's located in your saved file, and you can use it just like any other picture file.